Word and
Cool, thank you. All right, good morning. All right, today we're going to be talking about Classroom Screen, which is a daily resource for classrooms. And to begin, we're going to talk about a brief overview of what to expect in the presentation. So we're going to talk about what is Classroom Screen and different uses for the program or website. We're going to talk about the free versus the paid version. So when we talk about free versus paid, I've never, as an educator, used the paid version. I've only used the free version, and most of the features are the same. And we'll talk about the differences. As an educator, just using the basic account or the free account was more than enough for me. So because that's my experience, we're going to talk about the free features. And then after the presentation, you'll have the ability to explore and play because you'll know how to do it. Some of the expected outcomes for after this presentation is that you become familiar with Classroom Screen, that you're able to navigate tools and features of the Classroom Screen, and you are hopefully able to brainstorm ideas for using it in your own classroom. As we begin the presentation, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Tessa Talsma. I'm a digital learning coach here at Region 9. Before this, I was an educator for over 6 years, most of it in elementary, 3rd grade classroom, but some of it also in a middle school classroom. Throughout all of my education experience, I have used Classroom Screen both with middle schoolers and elementary students, and I found it effective for both. So let's go ahead and talk about some uses for using Classroom Screen in your own classroom. With Classroom Screen, you have all of the classroom tools at your fingertips. Whether you need a timer or you'd like to show your instructions, you can do it with Classroom Screen. With Classroom Screen, you have a lot of possibilities to support your class activities, stimulate engagement, and help students get to work. So if we're talking about some of the basic uses that educators would recognize, it'd be like morning work. It would be like using it to schedule your day, or a timer, something simple as that. Some of us have Promethean boards, so you may not need the timer feature, but it's there if you need it. You could post your expectations on there. You also could use it for centers. And if you were to use it with any of that, the screen allows for students to know your expectations without you having to say a word as an educator, which is really nice. So let's talk about the two versions. Well, technically there's 3. There's no account, a basic account, and then the paid account. And so no account means that you just don't sign up. The basic account is that you sign up, and then the paid account is that you pay for it clearly. I believe it's $29.99 a year, excuse me, it's not a month, a year. So it's not terribly expensive. However, again, as an educator, I wasn't looking to pay for another thing in my classroom. And I found that the free version worked just fine. I believe I did make an account. And so it's quick, it's easy, it's free. And so we'll talk about what that looks like on my own account. So looking at this, we have the free versus paid version. And so for free, you get the widget screen, which we'll talk about further once we get to exploring the website. You also are able to style those widgets. You can create collections, however, it will not save them. So if you create it, it's only good for as long as you have that tab open. You can do remote poll voting, which is pretty neat. So those of you that are virtual learning, or some of us that go into snow days and move into remote learning, that might be a feature that you might want to utilize. And then you are able to create 3 name lists. However, you are not able to save them. So again, it's just as long as you have that tab open. As for the paid version, you have all of those features. However, they might be a little bit modified or different in these ways. So you're able to save your screens, which again, I'll explain what that means in a little while. You're able to save your collection. So like each individual screen that you create, it's almost like a slide. You're able to create them. And if you wanted to save a collection, or if you wanted to create a workspace, which are different, you're able to do that. So essentially with the paid version, you're able to save things, whereas in the free version, you are not. Also with the paid version, you are able to create workspaces. In the free version, you are not, because you're not able to save anything. So you don't need to create a workspace. As for the name list, you're able to create up to 100, which you could do for small groups. Maybe you have different classes, different periods, different students, whatever the case may be, whatever your ideas are, that's up to you, because you have up to 100 that it'll save. And then you are able to customize the backgrounds a little bit more than you would be with the free version. With the free version, you are able to change them and things like that. So don't think that you're just stuck with the basic background, because I found a lot of utility in what they had. So moving forward, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about dashboard, as well as some of these things that I've talked about, like backgrounds, things of that nature. And so whenever we get into the website, you're able to kind of be like, oh, she talked about this, and we'll talk a little bit further in depth about it as well. So when we talk about our dashboard, this is what it's probably going to look like. You are able to customize it to a degree, but for the most part, your dashboard is going to look like this. This is just an example board. So again, you're not going to have the specific sixth grade in all of these screens, but it's a good example. So as a pro user, meaning someone that's paying for it, you would be able to see the screens that you've saved in your dashboard. If you don't have an account, or you have a basic account, which again, most of this is about the basic account, you'll see the screens that you've created in that session, and be aware that the screens are not saved with a basic account, or if you don't have an account. So you can see with the plus sign that you're able to create a new screen, and then they're grouped into collections, and we'll talk about that a little bit further when we're playing on the website. So let's talk about some backgrounds. As you can see, this is one of the backgrounds that they have as an option. You can see all the widgets at the bottom. So this is an example of a classroom screen. As I'm going back a slide, just so you can see that these are smaller examples of the different screens that they're talking about. So with backgrounds, the background of your screen can bring the perfect atmosphere to your classroom. So when you start a new screen, a background will be chosen at random. You can change the background by clicking the background button on the left of the widget bar. And so if you look down here, I know it's super tiny, but it says background right there. And then you can see kind of the different images as well. And again, we'll go through that in a minute. So again, on your widget bar backgrounds, you're able to change them. When you first open it, it's going to choose one at random, but you can change it. Let's talk about some of the widgets that you have on your widget bar right here. And so the first one is that I want to talk about is a timer. So again, some of you might have timers that you use differently in your classroom, whether it be on your Promethean board, whether it's one of your small magnet ones that sticks on the wall, but maybe you like to use your phone. However, my students were very visual. They really liked to be able to see how much time they had left, how much time they've been working, that sort of thing. Sometimes we'd set like noise level goals, like, oh, if we're quietly working for the first 15 minutes, then the last 5 minutes, you and a partner can check answers or something like that, right? So how the timer works, you can let your students know how much time's left. This gives them a visual reminder, as I kind of just described. You can add or remove minutes and seconds by pressing the plus or minus buttons, which you'll kind of see on here. And then you can adjust the timer along the way. The next thing I want to talk about is the poll feature, and it's a pretty quick and easy tool to collect feedback from students. So when you start the poll, you have to figure out you have to configure what kind of question you want to ask, and that's done in settings. So there's 3 different types, which you're going to see at the bottom of my screen. You can do multiple choice, you can do smiley faces, or you can do a true or false. So there's some variability. I mean, you can cover most things with those 3 options. For the multiple choice, You can enter up to 5 options for answers. And then with the smileys, students can enter one of the 5 smileys that best corresponds to their answer or their feelings, depending how you arrange that. And then obviously true and false works like any true and false question would. So when you enter the questions and answer options, after choosing a question type, you can enter the questions you want to ask your students. Your questions can contain a maximum of 160 characters. And with the multiple choice, you can enter up to 5 options, as I said a minute ago. And so after you've gotten your question created, you need to figure out how do they vote. And so there are 2 ways to get students to vote. Students can vote remotely on their own devices, and they can cast their votes by clicking one of the voting buttons on the interactive whiteboard. So interactive whiteboard or on their own devices. So in the widget settings, you can select which one you prefer. So if you choose the voting on the screen, then you're going to be able to spotlight that, which makes some of the other widgets less available, which might be a good option for those of you that have kids that are a little curious. And then you can change the type of settings and stuff, obviously, in settings. Whenever you're done with the voting and things like that, you are able to choose what kind of chart you want to get the feedback and like what kind of form, I guess. And so you can choose between a bar chart, a pie chart, or a donut chart, which is kind of neat. So when we talk about random names, what this does is this widget it lets you randomly select students' names from a list, essentially. So instead of using, maybe some of us have used like popsicle sticks with numbers or just randomly calling on someone, this is a way to randomize who is picked or called on or whatever the case may be. So it lets you randomly select a student's name from whatever list you've created. Again, with the free, you can create 3. With a paid one, you can create up to 100. When you start the random name widget, you must first configure it by listing a list of names or entering a list through the settings. You can choose the shuffle icon to start choosing a name. And so this is kind of what it looks like at the beginning. So another really cool feature of Classroom Screen is Group Maker. And with Group Maker, you can easily create groups for your class. The many options ensure that you always make the right groups, and you can find the Group Maker behind the More Widgets button in the widget bar. So at the bottom, there's a widget that says More Widgets, and then it'll open more. And so here you can see that you can change your group name, you can change the color, you're able to do a lot with this, and we'll talk about some of the specifics whenever we open the app. But essentially, you are able to avoid certain students working together if that's something that you need to do. You're able to decide how many groups you want, things of that nature. It's pretty neat. As for the text, that's very self-explanatory. I didn't put anything on here because it's as simple as that. You can type a message or instructions in a text box on Classroom Screen. So I did this every single day with my basic account. I use Classroom Screen for my morning work specifically. So when students came into the classroom, they knew exactly what they're to do. They knew what their voice level should be. They knew how much time they had. They knew everything. And so on the text, it was always just the morning greeting. Good morning. Hope you had a great weekend. Please get out your writing journal and begin on page yada, yada, yada. Choose one of the writing prompts from your menu board. Anywho, my students really liked it because they knew what to expect every single day. If I was in the hallway greeting students as they came in, they knew that they could come into the classroom and find what they're supposed to be working on. If there was a substitute, most of the time I would try to come in that morning if I was available, and I would get that up on the screen just so that they knew what the expectation was, even if I wasn't in the room and the substitute was. So text box allows you to just directly communicate your message to your students. Oh, the traffic light. My students loved the traffic light. The traffic light has several uses. The teacher can use this widget on their screen, but the students can use it in spotlight mode on their own devices as well, if you wanted to do that. And then you can simply press the light to turn it on or off. You're also able to change what they look like, as you can see on the screen. I use this to monitor kind of voice level and just expectations if they're following them. So obviously green, everyone's doing great. If it turns to yellow, it's kind of like, hey, let's maybe check ourselves and figure out what we're doing. And then red was like, uh-oh, what's going on? We need to recoup. Once we've recouped, it might move back down to yellow to let them know, hey, you're on the right track, and then back to green when everything's back to expectations. Another feature on Classroom Screen is a draw feature, and it can be used for fun doodling or extensive drawing, but it's all just within that little widget. And it's a simple yet pretty comprehensive toolbar, and you can choose all kinds of styles, shapes, and colors, and you can kind of see the toolbar at the top, and we'll talk about how some of the features work when we get the website going, which we are about to do. So when we go to Classroom Screen, you can see I've been there a couple times already. This is what it looks like whenever you just go to the website. So if you haven't created an account, you can just click Launch Now. Or if you want to sign up, you can sign up for free. I have signed up. And so let's check the pricing before I sign in, sorry. $29.99 for the year, yeah. And so see, that's very similar. You can also purchase it for your school if admin or anything like that wanted to do that. I never worked for a school that did it, but it's a possibility. So when you launch the screen, it looks like this. So it randomly chose this screen for me. I'm going to click the home button just so we can go to the dashboard. So this is what your dashboard looks like. And as you can see, it recognized my computer, just automatically signed me in, lucky me. So here's my little icon, tells you who I am, has my information, and then I can do anything that I need to do to navigate. It gives me notifications. And then it also has a help center, which is pretty neat because it's very extensive and kind of gives you information on everything. So back to your dashboard. This is your dashboard. So right here, you're able to create a new screen with the plus button. And then it creates a randomly chosen background for you as well. And then the screen options allow you to change its name or duplicate it. So if we go down here, you can rename it to, let's say, Talsma third period. And then maybe I really like the way I created that screen, so I'm going to duplicate it. If I didn't want them to have the same name though, I might rename it to Talsma fourth period. Okay, so kind of neat. Remember, if you are not paying for this program, I know I've said it a lot, but I will not save it. And so I know that a lot of teachers that I've showed this to feel a little bit frustrated because they're like, I didn't know. And I'm like, I tried to make it clear. So it won't save it. But if you have the patience, if you needed to create multiple collections, you could do that for the day as long as your session is going. So let's look at some of the backgrounds. Let's go to our new screen and let's look at some of the backgrounds. Remember, backgrounds were on our widget bar at the bottom, and we're going to go to backgrounds right here. And so again, I don't pay for my account and we have a ton of options. You're also able to star the backgrounds because if there's certain ones that you really like, you're able to star it. You're also, if you'd like, you can upload a background. So let's see here. Let's see what nonsense we can upload just for fun. Maybe I want to promote my digital learning stuff, right? So let's set that as my background. A little chaotic, right? But I can personalize it. So even if you're not paying for the account, you're able to personalize things, which is really cool. So I'm going to delete that because I don't want that background. It's a little distracting for me. I do want to show you what's available through the website though. And so there's a lot of very like naturey, there's some historical ones. I really like that, but my students enjoyed the animated ones, meaning that there was movement in them. So it was kind of cool to do this, and they changed. So like whenever it was wintertime, there was like, I believe there was like a fireplace one, and like during fall, there was leaves that would fall. So they make them they usually make them kind of seasonal. So I'm going to stick with some beachy waves. That feels calming and it makes me feel like I might be in a warm place, not in a chilly mountain town. So you're able to do a lot with this. You're able to upload your own, as I showed you, and you're also able to just choose from one of the very many options. So let's move forward to the timer. So when we were talking about the timer, it has 3 different layouts, as you saw on my slideshow. And the default layout shows the time remaining and an indicator on the left side. So if we did 10 minutes and I started it, it'd start, and then you'd see over here, let's maybe make it quicker so that you can see the indicator better. There you go. So you can see the indicator of how much time is left. So again, very visual, very great for students. As for the sound that it makes, so you're able to change the settings of, the timer. And so the sounds that it makes, you can mute it if you don't want it to make any noise, which sometimes was the case. So if my students were taking a test and I wanted them to, I don't know, be quietly working on homework until the last 10 minutes of the time, if they finished early and then they could switch to reading, I don't know. Whatever the case may be, you may not want your timer going off and being noisy and distracting. So you can mute it. However, you can also play the different sounds that it makes. So there's a lot. My favorite one. That one makes me very happy. If I'm being honest, there were not this many options whenever I was an educator, so it's kind of fun to go through and play with them. So you can also see how many times to repeat the timer. It gives you a ton of information. And what's really cool is you can customize what it looks like. So I've got some beachy vibes going on. Maybe I don't want to interrupt them. I have my timer there. Cool. And so some ideas how to use the timer. Obviously, it's about time management. And so it gives a lot of clarity for the teacher and students to announce the end of an activity and not lose track of time. I often use this along with the clock. And so the clock is cool also because you can make it a big, just digital if you only wanted. So maybe you and your students are working on time and you only want it to have the analog, just the clock face. You could do that if you want both because you're working on it, but we still need both. That's totally fine. I had this up every single day whenever I set up my settings. You can choose 24-hour or 12 a.m. p.m. You can add alarms, which is so cool. So maybe you needed a reminder, hey, we're going to lunch. We need to remember to clean up 5 minutes before. You can set an alarm for that, which is awesome. And you can choose the alarm sound. Very, very neat. And so maybe I want the clock to be a little more prominent than the timer, just so we're all able to see it. Anywho. Very cool features. So moving on to, let's look at the random name generator. So let's open our settings, and I don't have any name lists created. So I might want to create some names. I'm going to create some past pet names just because that's what comes to mind. Okay, so old pets and some current, but I've created my list. So I'm continuing, I click continue, going to my settings. It's asking, do I want sound on my list? Because remember, this is a random name generator. Do I want animations? Do I want to remember which students have been chosen so it's not repeated? So if Posey got chosen already, she's not going to get chosen again unless you want her to, and then you can turn that off. Anywho, I'm going to make it that. And if you wanted to add the color theme, you'd have to pay for it. So let's go ahead and see what happens. We've picked all of it. And let's generate. Yay! Okay, so you see how that works. And so if I were to do it again, you see that it's not repeating the names until everyone's had a turn. QR code, you can enter so those of you that are on one-to-one devices, or if you are, I don't know, let's say you work in a high school and maybe even middle school and your students are allowed to use their phones in class. This might be something you use. So maybe you want to generate the QR code. And so if you scan that, that'll take you to Region 9's website. Pretty neat. Sound level. So this only works if you have this set up to something that has a microphone. And so for right now, I'm on my computer, so I'm going to allow it. And you can see that it's monitoring my noise level. And so I can adjust what I want the max level to be. I don't know if you can see this very faint red line moving. So if you're doing group work, you might set it where you can be kind of noisy. And again, it depends on what you're doing. And I'm very close to my computer and I'm speaking at a presenting tone to a device. And so my noise level might be a little bit louder than if I were working with a partner at a center, right? And so you get to decide how sensitive it is, and it probably depends on how close or far away you are. You can decide if you want it to notify, or it can just turn the colors. So if you're working on silent work and then it gets too loud, let's say, and so there's too much noise, too much chatter, it'll turn red and kids will notice and ask for shushing. You can also mute it. So maybe the dinging is kind of getting frustrating, like when I was presenting just a moment ago, you can mute it. And so the dinging stops while whatever's happening, and you can turn it back on. You can decide to spotlight that. So it's the main thing. You can close out of that. So any of these you can spotlight. If you wanted to spotlight the clock, you could do that too. So spotlight just means that it's bringing it forward, making it the focus. So as for this noise or sound level, I used it in small groups. It was effective. You can choose how sensitive it is as well. And you can choose what you want the microphone to be. You can choose your sound, of course. You can choose what it looks like. Something to know though is it does not work on anything that doesn't have a microphone. So my Promethean board as an educator didn't have a microphone. Most Promethean boards, I don't believe, do. Therefore, this isn't going to work on the Promethean board because it doesn't have a microphone to pick up the sound, right? So if that's the case for you, use it in a center, use it in small groups, use it on a computer, maybe off to the side if you are someone that maybe has an extra device in your classroom, if you're lucky enough for that, right? So be creative on how you want to use that if you don't have access to the microphone on your main interactive touch board. Image, you can upload a picture for whatever reason you might need to, just like you would on any other website, just like I did for the background almost. This is the text that I was telling you about. Spelling's hard. You can change the size, the font. You have a couple to choose from. I think it's a fair selection for something that you don't have to pay for. And so you have all these options. And then you can also choose what you want your text box to look like. Draw. This was very difficult for my elementary students to navigate in the sense that they got a little frustrated, as well as it got very distracting very quickly. So if you're needing something to be a whiteboard, you can do that, and you can change the settings up here and play with all of that. Anywho, not very good, obviously. My mouse writing, you can use the eraser to erase things. A fun feature. So even if you're like, I don't really feel like setting this up, you can have a student set it up depending on what grade you teach. You can have maybe a job where the student sets up your classroom screen every day, or during centers is in charge of it, that sort of thing. For work symbols, I loved these. I love these a lot. And the reason for it is because you don't have to communicate what the expectation is. It's up here and it's a visual, and they have it all. It's all right in front of them. I'm going to close out of the QR code just for now. So looking at this, maybe they're reading to themselves, and so it should be silent. Maybe they're working with partners, and so they're whispering, and there's a visual of what that looks like. Maybe it's you're working at your table so you can ask a neighbor, or you're working together. And so it gives them a clear expectation of what the noise level is, what they're supposed to be doing. Traffic light, again, very fun feature. You can change what it looks like if you want. You can add it to every screen that you'd like. You can make it invisible of a background. Nice. Okay. Let's go to the More Widgets app. So I'm not sure if you saw what I did. I went to this very last widget and clicked it. You can also click that, and that makes everything disappear. So maybe you have a ton of stuff on your screen. You can make it disappear, but if you notice, it's still there at the bottom. So let's go to the More Widgets. And we have, look at all these goodies. So you can see that the things that I still have open, it has a little one next to. If I wanted to have multiple clocks, I can have as many clocks. I don't know as many. I think it's probably up to 10. But you can have a bunch of clocks if you want and a bunch of clocks. And so if you need more than one of any of these, you're able to use it. You can post a calendar up here. Maybe you are working with your young kiddos on days of the week and the date and things of that nature. You can have it up there. Maybe it's just helpful for your students writing their name and date at the beginning of the day, whatever the case may be. You can also customize it. Are we surprised? No, this is pretty neat. Anywho, so if you get really into the customizations and things like that, that might be something that where you're like, well, maybe I should end up investing in it, just because then you don't have to create all of this every single day. And so I would just set a background and just use the basic features. I didn't customize it very often. Sometimes on like Fridays I would, or like on a fun, when I had a little bit of extra time, I would, but on day-to-days when you're just trying to get everything accomplished, customization kind of fell to the background. And my kids still are very engaged with it. They didn't mind that, you know, this wasn't transparent in the background, right? So that's just something to keep in mind. You have the ability to do use a die for whatever reason that you might need it for. You can embed things onto the classroom screen. This is a group maker that I was talking about. I don't have any name lists, and so I'm not going to get too far into that. I guess we could do the same thing that we did a minute ago. I don't know how many names I have at this point. Just trying to think of pets at this point that anyone that I know has had. Okay, I think that should be enough to just kind of generate some stuff. So let's go ahead and I can choose how many groups I want. And so let's say I wanted 3. I'm going to make it medium so that we can see it. And let's make it just, that doesn't match our beachy vibe though. So I'm going to do this just so we can see it. We've got that all set up. And then if, remember, this is going to create the groups for me. And so it has decided what each group's going to look like. You can customize what they look like. You can choose the theme if that's something that you like. And so it's created my groups. And if I don't like them, I can shuffle them and it'll give you a different group. I believe I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to speak incorrectly. But, and so anyway, it'll create groups for you, which is pretty neat. You also have a stopwatch. So different than the timer. You can customize that as well. Oops, wrong one. You can connect to your webcam. Let's see if it'll let me while I am doing a Zoom. I don't know if it will. Cool. So I can record myself recording myself. And what you could do, so if you had a substitute and you decided to set this up before they come in or whatever the case may be, then you could even do a personalized video to your students, say, hey, good morning, I am out because my car broke down, or maybe you wouldn't show up to work for that. You're out because you're going to professional development, or whatever the case may be. You can leave them a personalized video. They'll see you on the screen. It's like you're there. Anyhow, and then the last one is obviously you can upload a video. So kind of cool. Anywho, I believe that is most of the features. Again, whenever I was in my collection right here, I created a couple of new screens. So whenever I'm on the screen, I have the option to just skip to the next ones. And so if I wanted to add my other stuff, because remember, let's say that maybe these are different classes and I want different things on here, then I can do that. Right. And so this is more of like what mine looked like day to day. I'd adjust the size of things, but I didn't change the backgrounds very much. Anywho, so you can set this for your different classes, different class periods, whatever the case may be, however you can best utilize that. I want to thank you all for your time this morning. I appreciate you being here, and I hope you're able to utilize Classroom Screen in your future.